Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm David, and I'm really glad you're here with me today. If you've ever felt nervous, shy, or unsure when trying to speak English, you're not alone. Maybe you've studied for months or even years, but still feel stuck when it's time to say something out loud. Maybe your mind goes blank, or your words come out slower than you hoped. If any of that sounds familiar, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to talk about something very simple but powerful: how to start learning English in a slow, easy way that actually works. You don't need to know every grammar rule. You don't need to memorize long vocabulary lists. And you don't need to speak perfectly. You just need to start slowly, gently, and consistently. Because fluency doesn't come from pressure, it comes from practice. From repeating small phrases, from speaking even when you're not sure. From listening to your own voice in English and allowing mistakes to be part of the process. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wanted to say a sentence in English but held back because you were afraid of making a mistake? Have you felt like you needed to study more before you could speak at all? That feeling is so common. But here's a truth I want you to remember. It's not about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try. Every sentence you say, no matter how simple, is a step forward. Every time you listen, repeat, and try again, you are learning. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to build confidence using very easy steps, things you can do at home, by yourself, even if you're just beginning. And I'll share real stories of people from different places, just like you, who started slow and made real progress. But before we begin, I want to ask you to do something important. If this podcast helps you feel supported in your English journey, take a second to click the like button and subscribe. When you do that, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping others find this safe space to learn and grow too. You're part of a community that believes in progress, not perfection. So take a deep breath, relax your shoulders. Learning English doesn't have to be stressful. This is a place where you can feel safe to start small, make mistakes, and enjoy the journey. Let's get started. Let me tell you a story about someone who might remind you of yourself. Her name is Lucia. She lives in Madrid, Spain, and she works at a small cafe in the city center. Every day, people from all over the world come into that cafe: tourists, travelers, business people, and many of them speak English. Lucia used to smile and nod politely, but deep down, she felt frustrated. She wanted to talk. She wanted to connect. She wanted to say something more than just hello or coffee. But every time she tried, the words got stuck. Her heart would race, her mouth would freeze, and she would panic even for a simple phrase like, "How are you?" Lucia told me once that she felt like a wall was blocking her voice. Not because she didn't know English, she had studied it in school, and she could read it just fine, but because she had never practiced saying it out loud in real life. She believed she had to study more, that she wasn't ready to speak yet, so she kept waiting for the perfect moment, for the perfect sentence, for the perfect confidence. But the perfect moment never came. Then, one day, something changed. Lucia overheard a tourist struggling to order in Spanish. The tourist smiled nervously and tried to point at the menu, but Lucia felt something shift inside her. She wanted to help, so she tried. She took a deep breath and said, slowly, "Can I help you?" It wasn't perfect. She said it a little too quietly. But the tourist smiled back and answered, "Yes, thank you." And that moment, that tiny moment, was all Lucia needed. It wasn't about the grammar, it wasn't about using big words, it was about the courage to speak. That same night, Lucia decided she was going to change the way she learned English. She didn't want to just study vocabulary or grammar rules anymore, she wanted to speak. She wanted her voice to feel natural in English, but she also knew she couldn't change overnight, so she made a simple plan. Every day, on her way to work, she would say 5 English phrases out loud. Just 5, that's it. She didn't choose difficult phrases. She picked ones that were short, useful, and easy to remember. Things like, "How are you today?" or "I like this coffee," or "What would you like?" She would repeat each phrase several times as she walked to the cafe. She would whisper them quietly, then say them again with more energy. She imagined real conversations. Sometimes she would even pretend she was talking to a customer or answering a question. It felt silly at first, but she kept doing it. After just 1 week, Lucia started to notice something. The words were coming more naturally. Her mouth felt more comfortable forming the English sounds. Her mind didn't need to translate as much. She felt faster, freer, more in control, and most importantly, she stopped freezing when someone spoke to her in English. She didn't always know the perfect response, but she had 5 phrases she could use with confidence and that gave her the courage to continue the conversation. A month later, Lucia was taking orders in English every day. Her coworkers started asking her for help when English-speaking tourists came in. She felt proud, not just because her English had improved, but because she had taken control of her own learning. She didn't wait for a class. She didn't wait for someone to teach her. She just started, with 5 phrases a day, while walking to work. What I love about Lucia's story is how simple it is. There was no magic, no expensive courses, no long grammar books, just small, consistent actions every single day. And this is something anyone can do. You don't need to live in an English-speaking country. You don't need to have perfect pronunciation. You don't even need a conversation partner at first. All you need is the decision to speak, to use your voice, to repeat phrases until they feel like your own. So many learners think they need to study for hours to make progress, but the truth is, even 10 minutes a day can change your confidence if you use those minutes to speak. Think about your own routine. Do you walk to work or school? Do you have 5 minutes alone in the morning or at night? That's all you need to start. Choose 5 phrases, any phrases. Maybe you say, "I'm learning English," or "This is my phone," or "I feel happy today." Say them again and again, until they sound familiar, until they feel like something you can say without thinking. The repetition is what trains your mouth and mind. It's what builds the muscle of fluency. Lucia's journey started with fear and hesitation. But by speaking out loud, just 5 phrases each, she found her voice, and you can too. You don't have to wait until you're perfect. You don't have to wait until you're confident. You just have to start, even if it's a whisper on your way to work. That whisper will grow. That voice will become stronger. And one day, you'll look back and realize you're having full conversations in English, just like Lucia. When people ask me how to stay motivated while learning English, my answer is always the same. Build a routine that feels safe, natural, and easy. Most people think they need more discipline, more study hours, more pressure. But the truth is, what they really need is a rhythm that fits into their life, not one that forces them to change who they are. Because the most powerful progress doesn't happen in intense moments. It happens in the quiet, regular habits that we create for ourselves. Learning English doesn't have to be a heavy task. In fact, the lighter it feels, the more likely you are to keep going. I always say, don't make English something you have to do. Make it something you get to do. A small part of your day, like brushing your teeth, drinking your morning coffee, or walking to the bus. You don't think about those things, you just do them. And if you can connect English to those daily moments, it stops being stressful and starts being natural. Let me give you a few examples. Let's say you usually watch a short video before bed or while drinking your coffee in the morning. Instead of watching something in your native language, try 5 minutes of a simple video in English. It could be a slow English story, a vocabulary video, or even a short clip from a beginner podcast. The key is to keep it short and easy so your brain doesn't resist it. If it feels good, you'll come back to it tomorrow. Another simple habit, Listen to English while you do something else. One of the best routines I've seen is listening to a beginner podcast while cooking, cleaning, or walking. You don't have to understand every word. You just let the sounds of English become part of your world. The more familiar those sounds are, the easier it becomes to speak them. I know one learner from Lyon, France's name is Matthew, who told me that every morning, while brushing his teeth, he listens to 2 minutes of English. That's it, 2 minutes. But he's done that every day for the last 6 months, and now he says English feels like a part of his brain. He doesn't translate as much anymore, and all he did was add English into a habit he already had. One of my favorite habits is something I call mirror minutes. You stand in front of a mirror, look yourself in the eye, and say simple English sentences out loud. I'm learning English. I feel tired today. I will go to work soon. It might feel strange at first, but there's something powerful about seeing yourself speak the language. You're training your voice, your confidence, and your connection to the language at the same time. I always tell beginners, it's not about how much time you spend. It's about how often you return. 5 minutes every day is better than 1 hour once a week. Why? Because language is like water. If you let it flow slowly, every day, it starts to fill your life. But if you pour it all at once, it disappears just as fast. The mistake many learners make is trying to do too much too soon. They get excited and study for 2 hours a day for a week, then they burn out and stop for a month. What works better is small steps that you can repeat without stress, things you enjoy, things that make you feel safe. Feeling safe is important, especially at the beginning. When you feel safe, your mind is more open to learning. You're more willing to speak, to make mistakes, to try again. So when you build your routine, ask yourself, does this feel calm? Does this feel manageable? If it doesn't, change it. There's no perfect way to learn English. There's only your way. And please, let go of the pressure to be perfect. I know it's tempting to compare yourself to others, to people on the internet who speak fluently, or to classmates who learn faster, but your journey is your own. If you speak one new phrase today, that's success. If you understand a new word, that's growth. Celebrate those moments. That's how confidence is built, not by waiting to be perfect, but by recognizing your progress along the way. I've met learners from all over the world: Lisbon, Berlin, Naples, Paris, and the ones who succeed are not the ones who study the hardest. They are the ones who show up every day, even for 5 minutes. They repeat the same phrases until they feel natural. They speak out loud to themselves without judgment. They enjoy the process, not just the results. So, think about your day. Where can English live? Maybe it's during your lunch break. Maybe it's 5 minutes before you sleep. Maybe it's right now, as you listen to this. Find a small space in your routine and make it your English moment. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours. Because when English becomes part of your daily rhythm, it becomes a habit. And when it's a habit, you don't need motivation. You just keep going, day by day, phrase by phrase. That's how fluency begins. That's how you build something real. Let me tell you about Marco, a man from Milan, Italy, who found a quiet but powerful way to improve his English without classes, without a teacher, and without speaking to anyone else. When I first met Marco, he told me something I've heard many times before. I understand a lot of English, but I freeze when I try to speak. It wasn't about knowledge, it was about confidence. And that's where many people get stuck. Marco worked as a graphic designer and had dreams of working on international projects. Many of his clients were based in other countries, and meetings were often in English. But when it was his turn to speak, he felt nervous. His voice would shake, his thoughts would scatter. Even simple sentences became difficult. He told me he felt embarrassed by how he sounded in English, so he avoided speaking unless it was absolutely necessary. He tried different things, watching videos, repeating after podcasts, reading aloud, but nothing helped him feel more comfortable with his own voice. Then, one morning, something changed. He was brushing his teeth, looking in the mirror, when he suddenly asked himself, in English, "What do I have to do today?" It was just a simple question, said quietly, but something clicked. The words felt different coming from his own reflection. He wasn't performing. He wasn't being judged. He was just speaking to himself. That moment became the beginning of a new routine. Every morning after brushing his teeth, Marco started speaking to himself in English. He stood in front of the mirror and said 3 to 5 short sentences. Things like, "Today I have a meeting," or "I slept well last night," or "I feel tired, but I will work hard." At first, it felt strange. He told me he laughed at himself. His pronunciation wasn't perfect, and he often repeated the same phrase 5 or 6 times before it sounded right. But here's the important part. He kept going. He didn't stop because it was uncomfortable. He leaned into the discomfort. Slowly, the words became easier. His mouth stopped resisting. His sentences started to flow. And after just a couple of weeks, Marco noticed that the fear he used to feel before speaking began to fade. The mirror gave him something very few learners think about: a safe space to practice, no one to judge, no pressure to perform, just his own voice, his own effort, and his own time. He told me that the mirror helped him feel connected to the language in a way nothing else had. It wasn't just speaking, it was speaking to himself, giving himself permission to try, to fail, and to grow. After a month of mirror practice, Marco had a meeting with an international client. Normally, he would prepare a long script or avoid speaking altogether. But this time, he felt different. He didn't have a perfect plan, but he had spent every morning speaking out loud. He had trained his voice. He had built a routine. When the client asked him a question in English, Marco didn't freeze. He answered. His sentences were short, but they came out clearly. That day, he spoke more English in 1 hour than he had in the last 6 months. Marco's story is a powerful reminder of something I tell learners all the time. Speaking English is not just about grammar and vocabulary. It's about trusting yourself, trusting your voice, and giving yourself the freedom to sound imperfect. And you can build that trust in quiet, simple ways. Mirror practice is one of the easiest and most effective tools for beginners, especially if you don't have anyone to practice with. You don't need a conversation partner to start using your voice. You are your first and most important listener. When you look in the mirror and speak, you're not just practicing language, you're building confidence. You're teaching your brain that it's safe to speak, that it's okay to make mistakes, that your voice matters. I always tell people, try 1 minute of mirror speaking each day. Just 1 minute. You can describe your day. You can say how you feel. You can make simple statements like, "I like this shirt," or "I need to buy milk." The goal isn't to be impressive. The goal is to be consistent. To show up for yourself. The repetition is what brings results. Marco didn't learn new words every day. He practiced the same ones over and over until they felt natural. He made friends with those phrases. He stopped thinking about them and just started saying them. That's the secret. It's not about how many words you know. It's about how many words you can use without fear. Marco now recommends mirror practice to everyone he meets who wants to speak English. He told me, "The mirror helped me hear myself differently. It helped me believe I could speak." And that belief, more than any textbook or lesson, is what unlocked his voice. So, if you're someone who feels nervous, shy, or afraid to speak out loud, try this. Stand in front of the mirror. Say your name, and then say 1 sentence in English. Look yourself in the eye. Say it again. Smile. You're not just practicing words. You're building something much deeper: confidence, trust, and the courage to speak freely. That's where real fluency begins. One of the biggest things that holds people back from speaking English is the belief that they need to wait until they're ready. I hear this all the time. People say, I need to learn more words first, or I'll speak when I feel more confident, or let me finish this course. Then, I'll try. But let me be honest with you. If you wait until you feel ready, you might never start. Readiness is a feeling that comes after action, not before. You don't wait to speak because you're ready. You become ready because you speak. Think about it this way. No one learns to swim just by reading about swimming. You can study all the techniques, watch hours of videos, understand how the muscles work, but none of that matters until you actually step into the water. It's the same with English. You can read books, memorize grammar rules, and listen to native speakers every day, but if you never speak, your brain won't learn how to use the language. You need to get in the water. You need to speak before you're ready. I know that can feel uncomfortable. I know that voice in your head that says, what if I make a mistake? Or what if I sound strange? But mistakes are not failures. Mistakes are proof that you're trying. They're steps in the learning process. In fact, the more mistakes you make, the more opportunities you give yourself to grow. Every time you use a word incorrectly and someone corrects you, that lesson sticks with you. Every time you hesitate, then finally say the sentence, you build confidence. You can't skip this part. It's essential. Let me give you a practical example. I was working with a beginner learner named Sophia from Florence, Italy. She understood a lot of English but had never spoken out loud. She kept saying, I'm not ready. I need more time. I gave her one simple task. Say one sentence in English every day. Just one. It didn't need to be perfect. It didn't need to be long. It just needed to be hers. The first sentence she chose was, I like coffee. That's it. But every morning, she looked in the mirror and said it. Then she added more. I like coffee with milk. I drink coffee in the morning. My favorite cafe is near my house. In 2 weeks, she was saying full paragraphs without needing to prepare. Not because she had learned something new, but because she had started speaking before she felt ready. That's the key. Use what you already know. You don't need complicated vocabulary to begin. In fact, simple sentences are the most useful. Think about everyday phrases. I like this. This is my book. I live in Rome. It is cold today. These phrases may seem basic, but they are your building blocks. Every fluent speaker once said these same sentences. Fluency isn't about sounding smart. It's about speaking clearly and comfortably without fear. And here's something I tell every learner. Don't worry about grammar at the beginning. It's okay if your sentence isn't perfect. Say it anyway. If you say she'll go to school instead of she goes to school, it's not the end of the world. The most important thing is that you are speaking. Grammar can be corrected later. Confidence has to be built now. I once spoke with a man named Thomas from Hamburg, Germany. He had studied English for years but never felt confident enough to speak. He had notebooks full of rules, lists of irregular verbs, and flashcards with difficult words. But when he had to introduce himself in a meeting, he panicked. So I asked him, what if you just said, my name is Thomas. I work in marketing. I live in Hamburg. Would that be enough to start? He paused, smiled, and said, yes, I can do that, and he did. That small act of speaking gave him the boost he needed to keep going. When you speak before you're ready, you activate a different part of your brain. You move from passive learning to active learning. You stop just receiving information and start using it, and that's when real progress happens. You'll notice that words come faster, your thoughts connect more easily, your mouth feels more comfortable forming English sounds. And yes, you'll still make mistakes, but you'll also start to feel more like a speaker of English, not just a learner. So here's what I want you to do. Take a few minutes today to speak out loud. Say 3 sentences. Any sentences? I want to learn English. This is my phone. I feel happy today. Don't worry about how they sound. Don't Don't worry if anyone hears you, just say them. Get your voice used to English. Repeat them a few times. Notice how it feels. The goal isn't perfection, it's movement, it's action. Speaking before you're ready is an act of courage, but it's also an act of learning. You're telling your brain, this is important to me. You're showing yourself that you don't have to wait for the right moment. You can create the moment. Right here, right now. One sentence at a time. That's how fluency is built, not in silence, but in the sound of your own voice, trying, learning, and growing. One of the most important skills in learning English, especially in the beginning, is listening, but not just any kind of listening. I'm talking about slow, intentional, focused listening, listening like a beginner. Because when you're just starting out, your brain needs time to adjust. It needs to get comfortable with the new sounds, rhythms, and patterns of English. And that doesn't happen by trying to understand everything all at once. It happens by slowing down, being patient, and letting the language settle in, little by little. A lot of people think listening is only about comprehension, about understanding every word, every sentence. But for beginners, that's the wrong goal. If you're trying to understand everything from the start, you'll feel frustrated. You'll feel like you're failing. You'll lose motivation. Instead, I want you to think of listening as exposure. Think of it as a way to get your ears used to how English sounds, to recognize common phrases, to hear how words are connected in real speech. That's where the real progress begins. Let me give you an example. I once spoke to a learner from Porto, Portugal. Her name was Sophia, and she told me she felt overwhelmed whenever she listened to English videos or podcasts. She said, "It's too fast. I can't understand. I stop listening after 10 seconds." I asked her what kind of content she was listening to, and she said she was watching TV shows in English with no subtitles. I told her, that's like trying to run a marathon without warming up. Your ears aren't ready for that speed yet. So I gave her a simple challenge. I said, this week, choose one 5-minute video designed for beginners. Make sure the speaker talks slowly, clearly, and repeats key phrases. Listen to that same video every day for 1 week. At first, she wasn't sure. She thought repeating the same thing over and over would be boring. But she agreed to try. By the 3rd day, she messaged me, "David, I understood more today than yesterday." By day 5, she could repeat some of the phrases without looking at the subtitles. By day 7, she felt confident enough to move on to another video. That's the power of slow listening. It's not about speed. It's about consistency and giving your brain the repetition it needs. When you listen to slow English, you give yourself the chance to notice details. You hear how a native speaker says, "What do you want?" Not as 5 separate words, but as a phrase, something like, "What do ya want?" You begin to pick up on intonation, the music of the sentence, and how meaning is shaped not just by words, but by tone. These are things you miss when everything moves too fast. But with slow English, those elements come into focus. And here's the great part. Beginner English content is everywhere. There are podcasts, videos, audio stories, and YouTube channels made specifically for learners like you. The best ones are clear, repetitive, and focused on useful language. Look for content where the speaker uses simple vocabulary, speaks with emotion, and pauses between ideas. That pause is a gift. It gives your brain time to catch up. I want you to listen without pressure. Don't try to translate every word. Don't stop the audio every 5 seconds to check the dictionary. Instead, let the language wash over you. Listen once just to get the feel. Listen again to notice a few words. Listen a 3rd time and try to repeat a sentence out loud. This is how real listening practice works. Repetition with intention. One thing I always recommend is to choose one short audio clip and make it your focus audio for the week. It could be a beginner podcast episode, a dialogue, or a short story. On Monday, you listen just to get the overall idea. On Tuesday, you listen again and repeat 2 or 3 sentences. On Wednesday, you try to shadow the speaker saying the words at the same time as them. By the end of the week, that piece of English becomes part of you. You don't just understand it, you feel it. I once worked with a man from Munich, Germany, named Ilias. He was very structured in his learning, very organized. He kept telling me, I need to understand every word or I get frustrated. I asked him, do you understand every word when someone speaks quickly in your native language? He laughed and said, no, of course not. That's when he realized he was putting too much pressure on himself. I told him, your brain learns through patterns, not perfection. Once he started listening to slow English with the expectation of complete understanding, everything changed. He began to relax. He started to notice repeated structures like, I want to, or can I get painted back? And his speaking also improved just by listening in a more patient way. Here's a simple way to get started. Choose one slow English video today. Listen to it 3 times. First, with no subtitles, just let your ears work. Second, with subtitles to connect sound with meaning. Third, repeat 1 or 2 sentences out loud. That's it. You've just trained your ear, your voice, and your memory all in less than 15 minutes. The beautiful thing about listening like a beginner is that it respects where you are. It gives you space to grow without pressure. It builds trust between you and the language. And it teaches your brain that English is not something to fear, it's something you can understand little by little. Slow English is your friend, it's your guide, and it's one of the strongest tools you have as a beginner. Listen every day, even just a few minutes. Let the rhythm of the language become familiar. Let it sit in your ears, in your mind, in your body. Because when you listen with patience, you give yourself the best possible chance to truly learn. One of the most powerful things you can do to improve your English, especially if you're just starting to begin thinking in English. I know it sounds difficult. I've heard so many learners say, but David, I don't have enough words. How can I think in English if I don't know enough vocabulary? My answer is always the same. Thinking in English is not about knowing every word. It's about training your brain to use what you already know without needing to translate all the time. Most people try to speak English by thinking in their native language first. They build the sentence in their own language, then they try to translate it word by word into English. This process is slow, frustrating, and it breaks your flow. You pause, you hesitate, you lose confidence. But what if you could skip the translation? What if the sentence, I need to go to the store, just appeared in your head naturally, without going through your native language first? That's what thinking in English does. It shortens the distance between your thoughts and your words. Let me show you how simple it can be. Think about your daily routine. In the morning, what do? You wake up, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you make coffee. All of these are short, basic sentences. And if you can say them out loud in English, you can also start saying them in your head. The next time you brush your teeth, don't think, Isto is kovendu's dainties. Just think, I brush my teeth, or even more naturally, brushing my teeth. These small shifts make a big difference. I worked with a student named Iko from Tokyo. She was very shy when speaking English, and I noticed that she was constantly translating everything in her mind before speaking. I told her, let's forget about speaking for now. Let's just focus on thinking. So I gave her a simple assignment. Narrate your day in English, just in your mind. When you open the fridge, say to yourself, I'm opening the fridge. When you walk to the bus stop, think, I'm walking to the bus stop. At first, it felt strange to her. She told me, I feel like I'm talking to myself all day. But after a few weeks, she started to notice a change. Her responses in conversations became faster. She didn't have to stop and translate. The English was already in her head. This technique works even if you only know 50 or 100 words. Use what you have. Repeat the same phrases again and again. I'm eating lunch. It's raining. I'm tired today. These are not complicated sentences, but they are powerful because they train your brain to connect directly to English. The more often you do this, the easier it becomes. It's like building a small path in your brain, and with repetition, that small path becomes a highway. One of my favorite exercises is what I call silent narration. You go through your normal day, but instead of thinking in your language, you try to describe everything in English. When you're cooking, you can think, cut the onion, turn on the stove, boil the water. When you're cleaning, you can say, washing the dishes, drying the table, throwing away the trash. This kind of practice doesn't require any extra time in your schedule. You're just changing the language of your thoughts during tasks you already do every day. Another tip is to use visual thinking. Let's say you see your shoes by the door. Don't say the word for shoes in your native language and then translate. Instead, look at the shoes and think directly in English. My shoes. Put on my shoes. Where are my shoes? By linking the English words directly to the object, you're removing the need for translation. And that's when English becomes a real part of your life, not just a subject you study. I also recommend talking to yourself. Yes, really. It might feel strange, but it's incredibly effective. When you're alone, try saying simple sentences out loud. I need to do laundry. I don't want to go outside. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. These are natural thoughts that can become natural speech if you practice them often enough. The more comfortable you are thinking in English, the more fluent your speaking will become, even if you're still learning. Sometimes, learners ask me, but what if I don't know the English word for what I'm thinking? That's a great question. In that case, try to say it in another way using the words you do know. For example, if you don't know how to say vacuum cleaner, you can say, the thing I use to clean the floor. If you don't know the word for hanger, you can say, the thing I use to hang my clothes. This teaches you to be flexible and creative with your vocabulary, and that's a big part of fluency. You don't need to wait until you're advanced to start thinking in English. In fact, the earlier you start, the better. Even if your sentences are simple, even if your grammar isn't perfect, the goal is not perfection. The goal is habit. And thinking in English is a habit you can build every day. I want you to try this tomorrow morning. As soon as you wake up, start narrating your actions in English. I'm getting up, I'm walking to the bathroom, I'm brushing my hair. Keep it simple, keep it natural. Don't worry about mistakes. Just let English be the voice inside your head. You'll be surprised how quickly your brain adapts. Thinking in English is not about forcing the language. It's about letting it in slowly, steadily, every day. It helps you become faster, more confident, and more natural when it's time to speak. And the best part, you can do it anywhere, anytime, without needing a teacher, a class, or even Wi-Fi. All you need is your mind, your attention, and the willingness to practice one small thought at a time.